My son didn't invite me to see my grandson being born. He said, "Mom, only close family will be there." After 3 long years of silence, I suddenly won the lottery, and that's when he finally invited me to meet my grandson. But what happened next left him pale. I'm so glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story travels. I never imagined that what should have been the happiest day in my family's life would turn into one of the most heartbreaking moments of my 70 years. It started on a Tuesday morning. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on my door with a bright smile. "Joyce," she said, "I just saw Joshua at the grocery store. Congratulations on becoming a grandmother." Her words froze me in place. I stood there, still in my robe, trying to make sense of what she'd said. "What do you mean?" I asked. Her smile faded. "The baby little Anthony was born yesterday, wasn't he? Joshua was so happy buying cigars and all." My heart sank. My grandson had been born 24 hours ago, and nobody had told me. I thanked her, closed the door, and leaned against the wall, my hands shaking. How could my only son, my Joshua, keep something like this from me? I grabbed my phone and called him, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. The third time, someone finally answered. "Hello, Mrs. Clean." It was Stella, my daughter-in-law. Her voice was cool and distant, as always. "Stella, sweetheart," I said, "I just heard about the baby. Why didn't anyone tell me? Is everyone okay? I want to come to the hospital right away." There was a pause. I could hear voices in the background, Joshua's among them. Finally, she said, "Actually, we've decided to keep things small. Just immediate family for now. I'm sure you understand." Immediate family. The words hit me like a slap. "But I am immediate family," I whispered. "I'm his grandmother." "Joshua's resting," she continued. "It's best if we have some time to bond as a family first, maybe in a few weeks." Then she hung up. I sat there staring at the phone. In 42 years of being Joshua's mother, through his fevers, school struggles, his college graduation, and even his wedding, I had never been left out of anything. Not once. But now, when my first grandchild entered the world, I wasn't even allowed to be there. I couldn't stay home. I drove to the hospital anyway. St. Mary's was only 15 minutes away. My heart raced the whole way there, caught between hope and dread. At the reception desk, a young volunteer smiled and asked how she could help. "I'm here to see my grandson, Anthony Clean. My son is Joshua Clean." She typed for a moment, then frowned. "I'm sorry, but the family requested no visitors except those on an approved list." "There must be a mistake," I said. "I'm his grandmother." She called up to confirm. I waited, watching other families pass by with flowers and balloons. Their laughter filled the lobby. When the volunteer returned, her smile was gone. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Clean, you're not on the visitor list." Not on the list, not welcome. I walked back to my car and sat there, unable to hold back the tears. It felt like my heart was breaking open. I kept calling Joshua, but every time it went straight to voicemail. Finally, I left a message. "Joshua, it's Mom. I know Anthony is here. I just want to meet my grandson. Please call me back. I love you." He never did. 3 days later, I finally got a text. "Mom, we need time to adjust. Stella's not feeling well. We'll call you soon." Soon. That tiny word would echo in my heart for the next 3 years. That night, I sat in the nursery I had prepared at home. I'd spent weeks decorating it. A perfect crib, tiny clothes, and little star decals on the ceiling. Now it all felt like a room waiting for someone who would never arrive. On the dresser sat an old photo of baby Joshua sleeping in my arms. I'd been 28 then, young and full of love for this little boy who made me a mother. Now, at 70, I was being told I couldn't be a grandmother. The hardest part wasn't just being left out, it was knowing my son had chosen it. He stood by and let his wife keep me away from the most precious moment in our family's story. And I had no idea that this was only the beginning. 3 years, 36 months, 1,095 days erased from my grandson's life. The math became my obsession. How many bedtime stories had I missed? How many first words, first steps, first hugs? Anthony was walking now, probably talking, maybe asking curious questions about the world around him, and he had no idea I even existed. During that first year, I tried everything. I sent birthday cards that came back stamped return to sender. I bought Christmas presents that stayed unopened in my closet because I had nowhere to deliver them. Sometimes I'd drive past their house, hoping for a glimpse of him playing in the yard, but the curtains were always drawn, their lives completely hidden from me. I even went to local events, the summer festival, the farmer's market, Joshua's company picnic, pretending to shop while secretly scanning the crowd for their faces. But they were never there. It was as if my son and his family had vanished from every place we'd once shared. The hardest part was realizing this wasn't just distance or busy schedules. This was deliberate. I wasn't being forgotten. I was being erased. When Anthony turned 1, I spent the entire day crying. I'd bought him a musical teddy bear that played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I held it close, imagining his tiny hands pressing its soft belly, his eyes lighting up at the tune. Instead, it joined the growing pile of unopened gifts in the nursery that once felt so full of hope. My friends tried to help, but their advice only made it worse. "Have you thought about a lawyer?" My friend Margaret asked one morning over coffee. "Maybe you have grandparents' rights." But I couldn't do it. I couldn't drag my own son into court. The idea of standing before a judge to request permission to see my grandson felt like admitting our family was broken beyond repair. By the second year, the hope began to fade. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped driving past their house. I even started packing up the nursery, though I couldn't bring myself to give anything away. The silence was unbearable. Joshua had always been my only child, my only family after my husband passed. His rejection left me completely alone through holidays, birthdays, and every small moment when you just want to share life with someone who loves you back. I started talking to Anthony's photo, the one Mrs. Patterson had shown me on her phone after seeing it online. She'd printed it for me, and I framed it. "Happy second birthday, sweetheart," I whispered last October. "Grandma loves you so much. I hope you're smiling today." The hardest moments came when I least expected them, seeing other grandparents holding little hands at the grocery store, watching families play at the park, or hearing cheerful holiday commercials about family gatherings. Each one was a quiet reminder of everything I'd lost. Eventually, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez. The loneliness had become too heavy to carry alone. She helped me see that this wasn't my fault. "This is about control, Joyce," she said gently one day. "Some people feel threatened by extended family. They want to control their world completely, and anyone outside that circle becomes an obstacle." Her words made sense, but they didn't make it hurt any less. By the third year, my grief had changed shape. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was quieter, deeper. I stopped expecting phone calls. I stopped waiting for apologies. I began to live for myself again, something I hadn't done since becoming a mother at 28. I started watercolor painting, joined a book club, even planned a solo trip to Ireland, a dream I'd postponed for decades. But late at night, when the house was still and the walls felt too quiet, I'd find myself wondering, was Anthony happy? Did he look like Joshua did when he was little? Did he ever ask about me? Or had Stella told him I was gone? It would be easier for her that way, to say I didn't exist rather than admit she'd cut me out. Then one ordinary Wednesday morning, everything changed. I was in the garden trying to coax my tomato plants to ripen before the frost, when my neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, called out from over the fence. "Joyce Ann, you need to check your numbers," he shouted, waving a newspaper. "What numbers?" I laughed, brushing dirt off my hands. "The lottery, last night's drawing. I think you might have won something big." I'd been playing the same numbers for 15 years, birthdays of family members, including Anthony's. It was a silly little ritual that cost me $2 a week, a small connection to a family that didn't want me anymore. I rushed inside, pulled the ticket from the drawer, and compared it to the newspaper Mr. Rodriguez handed me. All 6 numbers matched. $2.8 million. I stared at the ticket, then at the paper, then back at the ticket again. It didn't feel real. After 3 years of being invisible, 3 years of loneliness and loss, I was suddenly holding more money than I'd ever dreamed of. For the first time in years, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. And then, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in over 1,000 days. Joshua. The phone rang 3 times before I could find the courage to answer. 3 years of silence. And now he was calling, just hours after the local news announced the lottery results. Mom. His voice sounded exactly the same. For a split second, I was back in time. He was 8 years old again, calling from school because he'd forgotten his lunch money. Joshua, I whispered. My throat felt tight. My heart pounded like it was trying to climb out of my chest. Mom, we heard about your lottery win. Congratulations. That's incredible news. Of course, Stella was there, probably coaching every word. Thank you, I managed, gripping the kitchen counter for balance. Listen, Mom, I know it's been a while since we talked, and I feel terrible about that. Really terrible. Stella and I were talking, and we think it's time. You should finally meet Anthony properly. You know, as his grandmother. The words I'd waited 3 years to hear were delivered with the warmth of a scripted commercial. Have you now? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Yes, and Mom, Anthony asks about you all the time. He really wants to meet his grandma. We've told him so many wonderful stories about you. The lie was so effortless it nearly took my breath away. Anthony was only 3. If he'd been asking about me all the time, why had they waited until today? Why not last week, or any of the 1,095 days before this call? That's interesting, Joshua. What kind of stories? There was a pause, muffled whispering. Then he said, Oh, you know, about how loving you are. How you used to make those amazing chocolate chip cookies when I was little. Anthony would love to try them. My chocolate chip cookies, the recipe I'd perfected over years, the ones Joshua used to beg for. Pack extra, Mom, so I can share with my friends. The same cookies I'd imagined baking for my grandson countless times in the dark quiet of those lonely nights. I see, I said softly. And when were you thinking for this meeting? Well, actually, we thought maybe this weekend, Saturday afternoon. We could come by your place, bring Anthony over, make it really special, you know? This weekend, 4 days after the lottery announcement. 3 years and 4 days since I'd been told I wasn't immediate family. That sounds lovely, Joshua, I said. Even I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I'll make sure to have those cookies ready. Mom, that's fantastic. Anthony's going to be so excited, we're all excited. It'll be like a real family reunion. A real family reunion, as if the past 3 years had just been a small scheduling conflict. When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the winning ticket lying on the counter. The numbers blurred through my tears, but this time, they weren't tears of joy or grief. They were tears of clarity. For 3 years, I'd tortured myself wondering what I'd done wrong. Why my son had pushed me out of his life. I'd replayed every memory, searching for the moment where I might have lost him. But now I finally saw it for what it was. I hadn't lost Joshua 3 years ago. I'd simply discovered who he really was. The son who used to call every Sunday just to chat, who once drove through a snowstorm just to make sure I wasn't lonely. That Joshua no longer existed. Or maybe this was who he'd always been, and Stella had just given him permission to show it. That night, I called Dr. Martinez and told her everything. How do you feel about seeing them again? She asked gently. Angry, I admitted, but also curious. I want to see what kind of performance they'll put on, and I want to meet my grandson, even if it's under these circumstances. And what about the money? She asked. That question hit harder than I expected. My first instinct after winning had been to plan for Anthony's future college savings, family trips, a beautiful home where he could visit his grandmother any time. But that was before the phone call, before the rehearsed words, before the hollow tone in my son's voice. I'm not sure yet, I told her, but I know one thing. I took a deep breath. I'm not going to be anyone's wallet, not even my son's. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I baked chocolate chip cookies. The familiar rhythm came back like muscle memory measuring flour, creaming butter and sugar, folding in the chocolate chips. As the first batch baked, the warm scent of home filled my kitchen. When they came out golden brown, soft in the center, just the way Joshua loved them, I packed them neatly into the old blue tin I used to send in his school lunches, the one covered in tiny dents from years of use and love. Then I wiped my hands, picked up the phone, and dialed my financial advisor. "Margaret, it's Joyce Clean," I said. "We need to make some changes." "I'd like to discuss a few options for my lottery winnings," I told Margaret, my financial advisor, specifically charitable donations and how quickly they can be processed. By Friday night, everything was arranged. The cookies were ready, the house was spotless, and my plan was set. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. That afternoon arrived wrapped in postcard-perfect autumn weather. Golden leaves drifted across the yard, and the air carried that crisp promise of winter that once made me excited for family holidays. I was ready an hour early, sitting by the front window with the old blue tin of cookies resting on my lap, waiting for Joshua's car to appear. When the silver SUV finally turned into my driveway, my heart stopped. There in the back seat sat Anthony. Even from a distance I could see it. Joshua's dark hair, my late husband's stubborn little chin. He was taller than I'd imagined, no longer the baby I'd pictured for 3 long years. He was a child now, curious, alive, full of 3 years of memories I hadn't been a part of. Joshua stepped out first. He looked the same, yet older somehow, faint lines around his eyes, a hint of exhaustion he tried to hide with a smile. Then came Stella. The woman who stepped from the passenger seat barely resembled the daughter-in-law I remembered. At their wedding she'd been sweet and simple, soft brown hair, a genuine smile. Now, her hair was platinum blonde, styled to perfection. Her clothes were designer, the kind of outfit that probably cost more than my entire month of groceries. But what struck me most wasn't her appearance. It was the way she looked at my modest little house, her eyes scanning it with quiet disappointment, as though she'd expected to arrive at a mansion. I opened the door before they could knock, forcing a warm smile. "Joshua," I said, opening my arms. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, before stepping into my hug. He felt thinner than I remembered, and he smelled like expensive cologne instead of the familiar scent he'd worn since high school. "Hi, Mom. You look great," he said, his voice carrying the same practiced warmth I'd heard on the phone. "Stella, honey," I said, turning to her. She offered a polite smile and a brief, awkward hug. "Mrs. Clean, it's so wonderful to see you again. You look exactly the same." It was a kind lie, and we both knew it. 3 years of grief and silence had left their marks. A few more wrinkles, a few more silver strands in my hair. Still, I appreciated the attempt. And then, Joshua opened the back door and lifted Anthony out of his car seat. My grandson. He was beautiful, not just grandmother beautiful, but truly beautiful. Joshua's dark eyes, my husband's nose, dressed neatly in a tiny button-down shirt and khaki pants, like a little gentleman. He clung to Joshua's shoulder, shy and uncertain, his thumb tucked firmly in his mouth. "Anthony," Joshua said softly, "this is Grandma Joyce. Remember we told you about her?" Anthony peeked at me from behind his father's shoulder, eyes wide. "Hello, sweetheart," I whispered, trying not to cry. "I'm so happy to finally meet you." He didn't answer, just buried his face deeper into Joshua's neck. "He's a little shy at first," Stella explained quickly, her tone just a bit too sharp before softening again. "He'll warm up once he gets to know you." Gets to know me. As if I were a stranger they'd just met, not the grandmother who'd been deliberately kept away his whole life. We moved into the living room. I could feel Stella's eyes scanning every corner, the old furniture, the family photos, the simple decorations I'd collected over the years. I could almost see the math in her head, calculating what I owned, what I'd spent, and what might be left from the lottery. "Can I get anyone something to drink?" I asked with a bright smile. I made fresh lemonade and chocolate chip cookies. Joshua's favorite. Cookies! Anthony's head popped up. He wiggled in Joshua's arms. Anthony loves cookies, Stella said quickly. Don't you, baby? But just one, okay? We don't want to spoil your dinner. I brought out the blue tin, the same one I'd used for Joshua's lunches decades ago, and opened the lid. Anthony's eyes widened. Go ahead, sweetheart, I said. He reached in with both hands, grabbed a cookie, and took a bite. His face lit up instantly. Good, he said, crumbs tumbling down his little shirt. What do you say, Anthony? Stella prompted. Thank you, Grandma, he mumbled shyly. That tiny sentence almost broke me. 3 years of silence. And now, finally, those words. For the next hour, I watched the most elaborate performance I'd ever seen. Joshua and Stella smiled, complimented my home, made cheerful small talk about the neighborhood. Stella gushed about how much Anthony had been looking forward to this visit. Joshua nodded, pretending guilt for taking so long to reconnect. But their eyes told the truth. They kept wandering, to the framed photos, to the corners of the room, to the little details that might hint where the money was going. Stella's questions came dressed as casual curiosity. So, have you thought about upgrading your place? Joshua mentioned how expensive childcare has gotten, how they were thinking about a bigger house, and how Anthony will need a college fund soon. They weren't subtle. They were like 2 actors reading lines they hadn't rehearsed properly. Then came the moment that told me everything. Anthony spilled a bit of juice on his shirt. Without thinking, I reached for him with a napkin, a simple reflex, the instinct of any grandmother. Don't, Stella said sharply, then immediately softened her tone. I mean, it's fine. I'll handle it. That single word, don't, hung in the air between us, heavier than anything she'd said all afternoon. And right then, I knew, my plan was about to unfold exactly as it needed to. I mean, I've got it. Thanks, though. Stella snatched Anthony out of my arms so quickly that he started to whimper, and in that moment, everything made sense. Anthony hadn't been kept from me because they needed space or wanted time to bond. He'd been kept from me because Stella saw me as a threat, and Joshua had simply let it happen. When they finally left, promising that we should definitely do this again soon, I stood in the doorway watching their car disappear down the street. Anthony was crying softly in his car seat, tired and overwhelmed, while Stella gestured sharply at Joshua from the passenger side. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were talking about. They were making plans for my money, inside my house. I picked up the phone and dialed Margaret. Margaret, it's Joyce Clean, I said calmly. I'd like to move forward with the charitable donations we discussed. All of them. I want every transfer completed by Monday morning. After I hung up, I sat quietly in the living room. The blue cookie tin sat on the coffee table, now holding only 2 cookies. Anthony had eaten 3, giggling when I made silly faces, getting chocolate on his little fingers. For one brief, beautiful hour, I had truly been a grandmother. And I decided that would have to be enough. The phone calls began Monday morning. Mom, it's Joshua, he said, sounding cheerful. I just wanted to thank you again for Saturday. Anthony hasn't stopped talking about his grandma and those amazing cookies. I smiled in spite of myself. He's such a sweet boy, Joshua. He has your eyes. He really does, doesn't he? Joshua chuckled. Then, in a more deliberate tone, he added, Listen, Mom, Stella and I were talking. We'd love to have you over for dinner this week. Maybe Thursday. Anthony keeps asking when he can see Grandma again. The lie slid off his tongue so easily it almost sounded real. If Anthony had been asking for me after one visit, why hadn't he done so any of the 3 years before that? That sounds lovely, I said. Should I bring anything? Oh, just yourself. And, Mom, we've been thinking about Anthony's future. You know how expensive college is these days. Maybe we can talk about that when you come over. There it was, the real reason. Tuesday brought another call, this time from Stella herself. Joyce, hi, I hope you don't mind me calling, she began, her voice sugar-sweet. I just wanted to tell you how much Saturday meant to all of us. Joshua's been so happy since reconnecting with you." Reconnecting, as if our 3-year silence had been mutual. "It meant everything to me too, Stella," I said softly. "I'm so glad. You know, I've been feeling terrible about how distant we've been. I think I was just overwhelmed as a new mom, maybe a little protective. But seeing you with Anthony, you're such a natural grandmother." Her words should have warmed me. Instead, they felt rehearsed, like lines she'd practiced in a mirror. "Anthony's lucky to have such devoted parents," I replied carefully. "We try our best," she said quickly. "Speaking of which, Joshua and I have been talking about expanding our family. Maybe giving Anthony a little brother or sister. Of course, with daycare costs and everything, it's such a big financial decision." By Wednesday, the pattern was unmistakable. Every conversation circled back to money, college, childcare, future expenses. They were building their case, laying the groundwork for what they assumed would be my generosity. But that Wednesday evening, everything changed. I was at the grocery store, picking up ingredients for the dinner I planned to cook at their house, when I heard a familiar voice from the next aisle. I froze. Peeking around the corner, I saw Stella. She wasn't alone. Another woman stood beside her, both of them pushing shopping carts. "Can you believe how perfectly it worked out?" Stella was saying. "The timing was just incredible." "What do you mean?" the other woman asked. "Joshua's mom winning the lottery right when we needed it most. I mean, what are the odds? It's like the universe knew we were about to lose the house." My stomach turned cold. "Lose the house? Are things really that bad?" her friend asked. "Worse than bad," Stella sighed. "Joshua's been out of work for 6 months, and we're 3 payments behind on the mortgage. I've been selling everything I can online, but it's not enough. We were this close to filing for bankruptcy when that lottery story hit the news." I gripped the shopping cart so tightly my knuckles turned white. "So, you think she'll help?" the friend asked quietly. Stella laughed, a sound I'd never heard from her before, cold, sharp, calculated. "Are you kidding? She's been desperate to be part of Anthony's life for years. All we had to do was dangle that carrot, and she practically begged us to let her back in. That's kind of manipulative, don't you think?" "It's survival," Stella said. "Besides, what's she going to do with all that money anyway? She's 70, living alone in that tiny house. At least this way, it goes toward family, toward Anthony's future." The friend hesitated. "And if she doesn't give you what you need? Then we'll just have to be more creative," Stella replied smoothly. "Joshua found her financial advisor's number in her phone book when we were there Saturday. Margaret something. We could always call her directly, tell her it's a family emergency. Or maybe suggest that Anthony stay with Grandma for a while if we lose the house. You know, really tug at her heartstrings." They started walking toward the checkout, their voices fading, but I heard enough to catch her last words that burned themselves into my mind. "The old lady will never see it coming. She's lonely, desperate for family. She'll do anything to keep us around." I stood there in the canned goods aisle, surrounded by rows of soup and cereal, feeling my world collapse all over again. They weren't just after my money. They were planning to use my love for Anthony as leverage, and if I didn't give them what they wanted, they'd take him away again. Worst of all, I knew Joshua had to be aware of everything. He had to know about their financial trouble, their plan to manipulate me. The son I had loved unconditionally for 31 years was now part of a scheme to take advantage of his own mother. I left my grocery cart where it was and walked straight out of the store, barely noticing the cool evening air against my skin. At home, I sat in the kitchen staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to call and confront them right away, demand the truth, but a quieter, wiser part wanted to see just how far they were willing to go. So instead I called Margaret. "Has anyone contacted you about my lottery winnings?" I asked. There was a pause. "Actually, yes. A young man called this morning, said he was your son. He mentioned a family emergency and asked how quickly certain funds could be released. I told him I couldn't share any financial information without your authorization." My stomach turned. "Did he say what kind of emergency?" "Something about medical bills and a possible foreclosure," she replied. "He sounded quite desperate. I assumed you knew." "Medical bills. They'd already upgraded their story. "Margaret, I need you to add a security password to my account," I said firmly. "No one, not even family, gets any information without it. Understood?" "Understood," she said. After hanging up, I looked around my house with new eyes. They had been here just days earlier, quietly taking inventory. Stella's innocent questions about my investment plans suddenly made perfect sense. They weren't planning to ask for money. They were planning to take everything. I picked up the small framed photo of Anthony, the one Mrs. Patterson had printed for me 3 years ago. He was just a few days old in that picture, tiny and pure, unaware of the selfish plans that would one day swirl around him. That little boy deserved better. Better than parents who used love as a bargaining chip. And I deserved better than to be treated like a naive old woman too lonely to know when she was being used. Thursday's dinner was still happening, but not in the way they expected. Thursday evening, I arrived at their home with a homemade lasagna and a carefully practiced smile. The neighborhood was everything I imagined. Large houses, perfect lawns, facades of comfort hiding the truth underneath. "Mom!" Joshua greeted me at the door, all warmth and excitement. Come in, come in. Anthony's been asking about you all day." The house was beautiful, but cold. Every surface gleamed, every pillow matched, every photo was perfectly arranged. A showroom, not a home. In one corner, I noticed a few stacked boxes, silent proof of the financial trouble they'd been hiding behind. Then I heard the sound that melted my heart. "Grandma!" Anthony ran straight into my arms, wrapping his little hands around my legs. "Did you bring cookies?" he asked hopefully. "Anthony," Stella chided, "what do we say?" He looked up, eyes wide. "Please, Grandma." "After dinner," I laughed, ruffling his hair. "But I did bring something special." I handed him a small, wrapped gift. A children's book about grandmothers. He tore into it with pure joy. "What do you say to Grandma?" Joshua prompted. "Thank you," Anthony said, hugging the book to his chest. Then he looked up at me. "Will you read it to me later?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said softly. "Joyce, you're just so thoughtful," Stella said with that polished smile. "Anthony's lucky to have such a generous grandmother." The word lucky hung in the air between us. Lucky. Or convenient. Dinner was a performance, every word rehearsed. The table was set with fine china, the wine far too expensive for people struggling with bills. "This is all so lovely," I said, scanning the room. "You two have wonderful taste." "Thank you," Stella beamed. "Though, honestly, we've been thinking about downsizing. This house is just too much sometimes. The expenses are endless." Here we go, I thought. Houses can be such a burden, I agreed lightly. All those repairs and taxes. Exactly. Joshua jumped in eagerly. And with Anthony getting older, we need to think about his future. College, opportunities. You know how it is. Of course, I said. Family always comes first. They exchanged quick glances, clearly pleased with themselves. After dinner, while Anthony sat on the rug flipping through his new book, Stella served coffee. Joshua cleared his throat. "Mom?" he began carefully. "There's something we need to talk about." I set down my cup and looked him in the eye. "Go ahead, honey." He hesitated. "You know how happy we are to have you back in our lives. Anthony adores you. And Stella and I, we realize how wrong we were to keep you away." Stella nodded sympathetically. "We were just overwhelmed as new parents, but we see now how much we missed out on." "I appreciate that," I said softly. Joshua took a deep breath. "The thing is, Mom, we're in a bit of a tough spot. I lost my job 6 months ago, and we're behind on the mortgage. We hate to ask—" "But with your lottery win," Stella interrupted smoothly, "we were hoping you could maybe help us out, just until things get better." I looked at both of them, the son and daughter-in-law who had stolen 3 years of my grandson's life and were now trying to steal my peace of mind. "How much do you need?" I asked quietly. They exchanged another glance. "Well," Joshua said, "to catch up on the mortgage and get back on our feet, maybe around 200,000. I know that sounds like a lot, but it would really just be a loan. We'd pay you back once things turn around. $200,000. I smiled, calm and steady. I see. Inside, my heart was no longer breaking. It was finally steady. Because for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Nearly a third of my lottery winnings, that's what they were asking for. That's a lot, I said quietly. Let me think about it. Of course, Joshua said quickly. Take all the time you need. But, Mom... He paused, glancing at Stella. If we lose the house, I might have to move far away for work. You understand? And that would mean Anthony wouldn't get to see his grandmother, Stella added sweetly. It would just break his little heart. There it was, the threat, carefully wrapped in parental concern. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead stepped quietly onto the back patio and pulled out my phone. Margaret, I whispered, is everything in place? All transfers completed this morning, she said. The documentation should reach the charities by tomorrow. Thank you, Margaret, I said softly. You've been wonderful. When I came back inside, Anthony was curled up on the couch with his new book, Fighting Sleep. I sat beside him, holding him close, breathing in that gentle mix of shampoo and innocence. Grandma, he murmured, eyes half closed. Will you come see me again? My heart cracked just a little. I love you so much, Anthony, I whispered. Don't ever forget that. Across the room, Joshua and Stella watched with satisfied smiles, probably calculating just how much my affection was worth. I stood up, gently settling Anthony onto the couch, and turned to face them. I've made my decision, I said calmly. Both of them leaned forward, and then I said the words they never expected. I'm not giving you any of it. The silence that followed was absolute. Stella's smile froze mid-expression. Joshua blinked in disbelief. I'm sorry. What? Stella finally asked. I said no, I repeated. You're not getting a single dollar. Joshua went pale. Mom, I don't understand. We're family. Anthony is your grandson. Yes, I said evenly. And for 3 years, you kept him from me. Not because you needed space, not because you were overwhelmed, but because Stella decided I wasn't worthy of being in his life. That's not true, Stella protested, though even she didn't sound convinced. Isn't it? Then explain why you called me hours after the lottery announcement. Explain why every conversation this week has somehow included money or expenses or Anthony's future. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen toward them. You see this? 0 balance. Their eyes widened. Every penny of that lottery money, I said, has been donated to children's charities. All of it. Gone. Stella gasped. Joshua's face turned gray. You're lying, Stella whispered. Call Margaret Stewart at First National if you don't believe me, I said, though she won't tell you anything, not after you tried to reach her behind my back. Joshua slumped into a chair, his voice breaking. Mom, what have you done? We needed that money. We're going to lose everything. No, Joshua, I said gently. You lost everything 3 years ago when you decided to erase me from your life. This money was never yours. My love for my grandson was never something you could buy. That's when Stella's polite mask finally slipped. You selfish old woman, she hissed. What kind of grandmother does this out of spite? The kind, I said quietly, who refuses to be used. I glanced toward Anthony, still asleep on the couch, clutching his book, innocent of everything happening around him. He deserves better than to be used as leverage, I said, better than parents who think love comes with a price tag. I took one last look at him. His peaceful little face, chocolate smudges still faintly on his cheek, then turned back to them. I'm leaving now, I said, and this time it's my choice. Joshua's voice cracked behind me. Mom, please don't do this. We can fix this. We can work it out. I turned back once more. Joshua, I said softly, you had 31 years of my unconditional love, and you traded it for someone who sees family as income. I truly hope it was worth it. And with that, I walked out the door. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. The next morning, I called a travel agent and booked a cruise to Alaska, something I'd always dreamed of. I signed up for pottery classes at the community center, and I adopted a senior cat from the local shelter, an orange tabby named Marmalade, who, like me, had been left behind but still had love to give. I changed my phone number and shared it only with people who truly cared about me. 3 months later, Mrs. Patterson stopped by with news. Joshua and Stella had lost their house and moved across the country. She didn't know where, and I didn't ask. On my mantle, I keep one photo of Anthony, from our single afternoon together, his face bright with cookie crumbs and laughter. Sometimes I still wonder about him. I hope he's happy. But mostly, I focus on the life I've built. A life where love isn't conditional, where family isn't a transaction, and where a 70-year-old woman finally learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to walk away. I was free. Now, I'm curious about you, listening to my story. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. And before you go, I've left 2 more stories on screen that I think you'll truly enjoy. Both of them have endings you won't see coming. Thank you so much for watching until the end.